Well, hi, class. So this is week two. You all posted last week on the influence of the creation account and the creation imagery in the New Testament. Obviously, that's an enormous topic, and what did was give you each sort of a little bit of your own field to work on, and you came up with some really, really good posts. I thought rather than try to comment them on individually because the week's already winding down and that there's way too many posts in general in that forum, so that's why we're going to split it up starting this week, just so we could maybe hit some highlights and just kind of hit some general themes of things I want you to see. And the first thing is that very good way to think of the New Testament as an interpretation of the Old Testament, that the New Testament writers are actually interpreting the Old Testament story around Jesus Christ, indeed the whole Christ event, and the church. So how does that happen? Well, one way would be looking at the Gospel of John. Several of you had that one, and there's a lot that could be said about that, but let's just hit a few of the key points. Obviously, when John begins his gospel, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That is clearly a creation allusion there. He's reinterpreting the creation story, and he's telling us now that Jesus is not just this guy who was born of a virgin and showed up. No, he's actually the Logos of God. And if you know anything about Platonic thought, the Logos is pretty much it's the thing that makes the world intelligible. It makes the world tick. It makes the world make sense. And it also gives us the word by which we can actually communicate the world. So it's a very, very important concept. And he, basically he's putting Jesus right at the center of it. He is the Logos, not just as an abstract collection of ideas that God's had from all eternity, but really a person of himself with his own will and intellect. So this is a very important idea. Now, obviously, that's new creation. The light and the darkness imagery that the prologue to the Gospel of John brings out is also very creation-oriented. This idea that Jesus gave children to those who would hear him power to become children of God, born not of flesh nor of blood, but of God, which is later in the prologue. This is after we find out the Word became flesh. Of course, flesh is originally a term in the Greek Old Testament used the first time in the Bible to describe Adam and Eve when they were one flesh. Now we have the Word, the eternal Logos, becoming flesh. In other words, becoming at one with humanity, and that's key. So, but we also have this idea of giving the children who believe in him power to become children of God. And that's, we're going to find out later, looking ahead in John chapter 3, when Jesus says you must be born from above or born again, however we understand the preposition anothen, is clearly you need to be a new creation. You need to become a new person entirely. And so this is all implicit new creation theology in this. Okay, so it's clear in John 1. It's clear in John chapter 3. It's also in John chapter 2. When you look at the story of the wedding feast at Cana, there's a lot of creation symbolism in this. Notice that there are 6 stone jars of purification that... First of all, you find the wine's run out, which symbolizes the exhaustion of the old created order, that there's 6 stone jars of purification that Jesus takes, which are to be filled with water. The 6, of course, symbolizes the old creation, which, of course, was made in 6 days. And, of course, now the transforming and the elevation of the old creation by converting this to wine, not only is Eucharistic foreshadowment, but is also new creation imagery. You're in effect transforming the old creation into something which formerly could only give natural life, which perished, but now gives supernatural life. So it takes the old creation and all its inadequacies and infuses it with the power that it needs to have. And of course, you see more of that in John chapter 4, where Jesus and the woman at the well have this conversation, and he's asking for a drink of water, and she thinks he means only natural water, and so she's responding to him on a natural level where he's really speaking on a supernatural level. He's speaking about water which if you drink once, you'll never get thirsty again. So there's something supernatural about the water that he's speaking about, whereas she's only speaking in the purely natural realm. So this is also, in context, new creation imagery. It shows you that, in order to understand this thing that Jesus is bringing, you need to understand the idea of this new creation, which transforms, elevates, heals, perfects the old creation, and turns it into an engine which can give eternal life. And you would see the same thing in John 6. I didn't have you look at that one, but in context, there's a lot of new creation in that as well, although there's a lot of other imagery there too. So all of this is, an excellent way to see how the Gospel of John interprets the Old Testament, and interprets in particular the creation imagery. And perhaps this is why, by the way, that the cleansing of the temple is located earlier on in that gospel. It may well be that the temple itself is in context of John, the literary context of John, meant to sort of foreshadow the creation itself. Because remember, you have this idea in the Old Testament, which we could trace out if we had a little bit more time, where the old creation is kind of like a temple itself, and the actual temple that Herod built, originally Solomon built, but that one was destroyed. But Herod, rebuilt, is in some way a symbol of the whole creation, the whole created order. And so maybe cleansing the temple and going about that work is in some way symbolic also of Jesus not only becoming the new temple in his body, but also cleansing and by way of that, cleansing the old temple, and in fact replacing the old temple with himself. So there's a lot of new creation imagery, a lot of very, very rich and deep creation interpretation that we have in the Gospel of John. Okay, so I'm going to stop here for a second because I need a break, but I'd like to, when I come back, talk briefly about new creation imagery in Paul, okay?